All right, and welcome to another fun installment of, well, where I get to interview some racers. Very excited to welcome in Zoey Edenholm. Raced Formula 4 last year with two teams, Alliance Racing and J. Howard Driver Development, as well as got to race at Las Vegas with the Saline Cup. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing doing awesome as well. Well, let's get into it. So, how did you end up getting into racing?
Okay, so when I was younger, I thought I was going to be a gymnast and be at the Rio or in Rio doing the Olympics this year in 2020. And when I was about 11 years old, I have always been surrounded by racing. I'm really close with Jagger Jones and his family, grew up in racing. So I was always really close with them and was always at races, and my dad's in the car business. But I got to drive his cart back in 2010, and I was like, fell in love with it. So then I was always at the track all week, both of us. We were always driving, and I moved up just through karting and then got into open wheels. So that's how I started.
It's pretty great. And so, of course, yeah, you decided it was going to be your passion pretty early on in your life. Then that's pretty great. So, in your early karting days, let's just talk about that. So, when did you really start to race competitively in karting?
So I started racing in 2011 karting, and then in 2000 probably 13, 14 is when I started racing Rotax nationally and was in the mini max class, and I was running all over the country, everywhere, anything I could. I wanted to race it. And so I started in that, and then I moved into X30 and the other classes. throughout the years.
It's pretty great. And of course, I know that you like to race in this one race a year. I always have enjoyed this, at least watching it, was is the Las Vegas Nationals. So tell us a little bit about that.
So Supernats, I'm 99% sure it's the biggest race in the world, kart
Hmm.
race at least. And so it's crazy that so many people come from all different countries to race this one race that's in the parking lot of a casino in Vegas. So it's so crazy. You walk 10 feet and you're at the hotel, and it's just there's so many people, and the fact that you might not be racing on Sunday is insane to me. There's so many karters that train like all year for this race, and I always just love the atmosphere and love the competitiveness of everyone at the track, and it's like a family oriented like when you're going up through karting, like it's all with your family, and I just love the aspect of it.
That's pretty great. Yeah, I've always wanted to attend it, but it's very fun to watch because, well, like, as you can, well, as you know, since there are so many carters, especially on that final day, how difficult is it to get through the race without, well, maybe damaging your cart or anything like that?
It's very difficult, especially with the tracks that they make, and it's all barriers. There's no runoff or anything. So if you just get tapped and you go straight into the barriers, your cart's pretty much done for most of the time, and it's really hard to get going again and with the damage that's done.
Yeah, exactly. So, when did you really realize that, or when did you know that it was time to move from carts into, well, either open wheel race cars or just real carts, or real cars?
Um, my team owner, when I was racing under Team Kuna USA, Mike Marini, he helped me a lot in moving on through the levels of what I could do or what path I want to take. And I decided that they basically told me, like, are you sure you want to do this for a living or try and make a career out of it? Because once you move into cars, it becomes like really real versus like karting is kind of, people kind of die in karting and they kind of give up. Where once you move to cars, it's like the real deal. So I was 15 when I first drove a USF car. And so that was back in 2016 when I really was, they gave me the option to keep going. And I was like, of course, I want this as a career.
Wow, 15 years of age. It's, I mean, that's a perfect place to start off as well. Because I know multiple drivers, like another driver that I've interviewed, Aiden Yoder, kind of started off around that age as well with the carts, or with the cars. I mean, so so many routes for to choose after karting. Why open wheel?
I chose open wheel because it's more of like a challenge, is what when I researched about it, I was like, to race the Indy 500 or to have that big goal and go for that. I was like, that looks like so much fun. And open wheel cars just always intrigued me. I always watch like IndyCar races on TV, and I was like, I want to do that. Like sports cars are cool too, but you see them they kind of look like on the street. So I was like always interested in like open wheel, like that looks so different. And like all the aspects of driving, like it takes a lot more in open wheel is what I've learned so far.
Mm-hmm.
Is there's a lot more to learn there.
I see. Yeah, of course. Yes, very difficult indeed to drive. Um,
Yeah.
than yeah, regular cars basically. So yeah, just moving on to that. How would you basically sum up your rookie season when you started up in Formula Four and so on?
So I would sum it up as one of the best learning experience I've ever had. Being with Alliance Racing, they were a new team, fairly new team when I joined. So it's kind of a learning year for all of us. And I would say, like, my goal by the end of the year was getting top 10. And then I did that in the third race of the season. So I was super stoked with that. And then just learning and being and learning these tracks that I've never been to before was really cool, and I had a great time. So it was really fun.
Yeah, that's one thing when you look back as well as at just everyone where they finished up in the season. You see from each race, you were one of the ones to beat out each of your teammates, which was very impressive, in my opinion, because, well, there's just about 30 drivers plus racing in each race.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. Very impressive there. And just
Thank you.
with also, yeah, but being with Alliance Racing, how was it being able to drive for them being sponsored by Gas Monkey? I know you kind of answered that, but how was the team basically? How was the chemistry like?
The chemistry was they felt like a family. They're very like family oriented. The wife that our team owner's wife would cook us food, and she was always really sweet. So I always felt welcome and at home. And it was always great to have that at the racetrack where things can get intense. So they were a great team. And we had a few struggles going through different mechanics and different engineers. And that was the only thing that was a little bit tough. But just all in all, they were super sweet. They were very helpful in learning. And I had a great year with them.
It's pretty great, indeed. Um, with so earlier in the season, we know there were a lot of mixed conditions throughout the races. I think VIR was maybe one of the drier races in the year, but how difficult was it to drive in the rain or race in the rain against competitors that kind of had that balance or had that background?
It was definitely a very big learning curve. Being the first race was in Road Atlanta, and I only had one test day in the car before I raced. Or I think it was a 2 test day like weekend that I did before I raced the season. So I didn't, and it was 2 weeks before. It was all very last minute when I ran with them. So running the first race in the rain was a little stressful, but it was very difficult to see everyone kind of just be like have ran it before. There was a few people I think in the series that have ran for like 2 or 3 years, I think maybe. And it was just all learning. I was just learning how to drive in the rain and the wet conditions and adapting as I could.
Yeah, I mean that's really all that you can do, especially with just about 2 days of test, which is impressive in itself to just figure out the race car when considering those race cars sometimes you won't necessarily know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so of course, just before we get more into the season, I guess, what was your favorite racetrack that you raced
I
at?
liked Coda for sure because that was a track that it was really like flowing. I liked the flow, and then it was fast, but it took us like a while to get around the track. So I thought that was cool that it was like a long track, but you feel like you are going really fast. And of course, we're on the same track as F1, which was really cool. And I really liked VIR. That was a cool track too, and that's where I got my best finishes, I believe,
Yeah, yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that was really cool.
yeah. That was your best finish. I forget exactly where you finished at, but very impressive first two races is as well. Just going through that season once again, it's very difficult, and it's about if for of course the fans that don't know, there's about 3 races at least a week for these drivers, and then also how was it with the strategy? Because I know you all only have so many tires to choose from throughout the weekend, and you have to mix them up throughout that week. So how was it just trying to strategize for the race weekend?
It was interesting because we tried a few different strategies, and they all kind of worked the same. The tire compound was pretty good. We didn't really have tracks where they really like completely like fell off, but we tried a few strategies where we would put on both of our sets in qualifying and like scrub them and see if we could run them, if that would be better if for the race if we had just scrub tires. And we tried that. Being a new team, we had to try a lot of things because we didn't really know. So it was definitely, we were all learning and having different engineers too. We kind of got different insight from different thinking processes. So that was cool too. But for sure, there was a lot of experimenting with the tires and how we could only use 2 tires between qualifying and a 3 race weekend, or the 2 race. I think there's most of them were 3 race weekends, I believe, and then the 2 race weekend.
Yeah. And so, of course, yeah, you talked about VIR. I want to kind of go back to it. That is when you did score your first points of the season. How much of a benefit did that give you for the rest of the season, just moving forward?
It definitely helped a lot with my confidence. I was like getting the hang of things a little bit more and really had more confidence in the car and was feeling a lot better about being the first race. I was not very fast due to me not being in the car, and then going and being the third race or the third weekend of the year doing pretty well. So I was pretty stoked, and being at by the end of the year, I wanted to be top 10, and doing that in the third race of the season definitely helped me a lot. So that was cool.
Yeah. And so, of course, I guess, yeah, jumping also very late into the season, you have Sebring, then Circuit of the Americas. How would you compare the bumps for both tracks?
I would say Sebring is a little different because the concrete. So it was like when it was a different bump versus Coda was like a more like, I would describe it like a more smooth bump. Like you would know that it's coming versus like Sebring. If you hit something a little wrong, you would know that you hit something a little wrong. Or if you're like a centimeter off of where you're supposed to be, like you would know, because it's just that compound is so much different than any track I've ever driven on.
Yeah. Because, well, yeah, pavement compared to concrete is always going to be different. But,
Yeah.
and then, of course, now getting into this interesting question, the final weekend for F4 USA, you ended up switching teams.
I
Talk
did.
about how that came about.
So we had some problems with Alliance that we weren't sure what was going on with them, what they were racing. I knew they had trouble with SCCA. So my dad panicked and was like, would you mind moving to Jay Howard for the last race? This was also 3 days before the race. So this was a pretty intense time because I was all excited to go to Coda, and we were flying to Dallas to go to see the Gas Monkey garage and do autograph session there. So we were originally flying to Dallas, and I still ended up flying to Dallas and doing a simulator test, which was cool too. But it was definitely an interesting time. I don't want to say much about it, but it was just a change, and I think it was a good change. Learning from different teams is, personally, when you're younger, I think is a great opportunity if you can. Getting different insights from different people and different like teams and stuff, and learning what you work best with, I think is really important, especially in the when you're moving up.
So yeah, you talk about it 3 days before basically the race weekend. So just how are you able to connect with the team too? Because yes, you talk about learning from a different team, but you still have to figure out your crew chief, your spotter, just talking to your crew. How were you able to just get connected that fast?
I've learned to adapt pretty fast when I need to. So I've always had that like instinct to, when you need to adapt, just do it. And everyone at Jay Howard was really welcoming, so that was really helpful too. And I think they were doing great all season, so that also helped with my confidence going into their team and trusting them to relay good information and help me in the last race. So I had a lot of trust in them to give me the right pointers and going into that weekend.
It's pretty cool. Ju- then of course with that weekend switching teams, how did the car feel? Because of course, well, actually before I ask that, how was qualifying? Because that was it's always a major thing. I've talked with the drivers before, and they say that's one of the toughest things to do, especially since you have so many cars coming out at once. It's all just a lot of them coming out. So how how are you able to adapt to that all season? How did that come about with the biggest race weekend?
Qualifying was definitely a struggle at Coda. Since there was so many people there, that was the biggest field we've ever had. It was like people everywhere, and you had to just like stay focused on running a good time and being the track being, I think it was like 2 minutes and 15, 16 seconds or
Mhm.
something like that. You didn't have much time to make a good lap. Or if you made a little mistake or if someone pulled out in front of you, you had no time for that. So it was I learned the most about qualifying and how important it is to be perfect on basically your first lap is at Coda, because I think they gave us a 30-minute session, and with all the yellows and stuff, it was really hard to put down a fast lap quickly there, especially only getting one practice session
I
before.
think have to go in the pit, and
Yeah.
so then you only had 5 minutes, so that's basically one lap.
Yeah. It was insane. It was definitely adapt quickly or you might be starting in the back.
Yeah, and then yeah, with that largest group coming in after qualifying, going to that first race, what was your mentality like?
I was I didn't have the best qualifying, so I was a little nervous with all the cars going all into this corner uphill. So I was a little nervous about the start, but I was excited to move forward because since I knew I had a rough qualifying, I was like, that's okay. Like, I'm just going to have to work harder now in the race. And racing at this track, there was a lot of passing opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So I was super excited to just try and go through the pack and work up as much as I can. So that was my main. I was pretty confident going into the race, just to move forward. That was my goal.
Sound, sounds like a pretty good goal, in my opinion, as well. So, with all of that, how would you sum up just, well, yeah, how would you sum up not only your whole season, but just also that one race weekend?
I would sum up the whole season first
Mm-hmm.
as definitely for my rookie year, being my first rookie year in cars, since I have just tested cars previously to F4. I didn't have a full season in anything. So, my first full season in anything, I think it was great learning and it taught me a lot for this year, which I'm really excited for. And Coda definitely was one of the coolest events and well put together events that I've ever been to, with all the F4 media and everything that we did, like everything combined between the race and all the media and everything. I thought it was one of the best weekends I've had.
That's pretty good. And then, of course, yeah, the car for that weekend as well, I guess, was feeling pretty good.
Yeah, the car was feeling I definitely had to adapt to a different car. They do their we had different setups obviously, so it was definitely something new to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting to adapt so quickly to a new team and a new car. But I think for doing that, it taught me a lot, and I'm really grateful to have that opportunity.
That is awesome. And now, of course, switching off from Formula 4, you did get to race, I believe, a one off race in the newly developed Celine Cup, which was a part of, I think, the Touring Car America series or something like that. But either way, just talk about that because I know it was an interesting event. You had teammates as well, so it was a bit of, I guess, kind of an endurance race.
Yeah, so those races are an hour long, and you can have a teammate or you can run by yourself. So originally, I was invited to run one car by myself, and then there was a couple of problems with the other cars. So then I got paired up with Lindsay, which she is great, love her, and we had an amazing race. It was there was two races. The first one, we unfortunately had a rough time on the start and got a little damage to the car. But in the second race, we started, I want to say, 8th, and we fell back to 10th. And then Lindsay drove it up to 6th, I believe. And then I drove it up to 2nd. So that was really cool that we got to do it as a team and work together. And it was something that I've never done. I've never done a driver switch either. So they make everyone stop for I think 2.5 minutes. And so that gives time for the people that have a driver switch have to driver switch. And that was definitely one of the more interesting races. And those cars were nothing like I've ever been in before. So adapting to that too, we had one practice day and then we had to race the weekend. So it was definitely a different car to adapt to since I mainly ran open wheel before. But it was a really fast car and it was a really great experience.
And also talking about the road course too, because yes, it's at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and so they opened up the infield for that. And so talk about your first experience, or well, just talk about having to go through a roval.
I've never driven on a roval before, so it was something that I was a little nervous about. And we went around the oval, and when you come down into the infield, there's like two walls on each side of you, and there's a tiny little opening with curbing for you to get through. And I was like, we're going like 155 and then braking and going into this. I was like, this is a little crazy, but it was a lot of fun learning and a lot of fun learning how to drive a new car and something that I've never driven before on this track that I've never been on a roval before then. So everything was new to me.
That's pretty cool. And well, yeah, of course, and now also getting into this question, I've asked all the drivers this as well, is because I know you're still, if I'm not mistaken, in high school and still going through school, and even for kids that just basically, how have you managed to be able to balance the racing life with school?
I think starting racing when I was super young, when I was 11, 10 years old, I think I always had to do that. So I didn't know any different. So I was always catching up on work or getting my makeup work, or I knew I had to be gone this weekend. So what was the work for this weekend? And it was all just like management that I learned at a very young age. So as I got into high school, I kind of it was natural to me by then, but it was definitely a struggle at sometimes trying to learn at school while you're gone and keep up with the work while everyone's in class and you're trying to also drive a race car. It was definitely something that not everyone has to do. So, but I wouldn't trade anything for it. I think it taught me so much about management skills and time managing. So, it was definitely a good thing for me.
So, any advice to anyone that's, of course, racing and having to do that exact same thing?
I would say I always talked with my teachers before the year started and let them know kind of this is what I want to do as a career and this is what I'm trying to make as a career. So most teachers will respect that if you just bring it up to them at the beginning of the year. So it's mainly talking with your teachers, I would recommend. That's what helped me a lot is having them understand what I do so that they can cooperate when we need to.
All right. And now, of course, you said looking forward to next season, so it might sound like you're going into Formula 4 at least. But the cool thing is they released a schedule, I believe, not too long ago, about a month ago. So I know you've probably looked at it. What do you think about it?
I think I'm really excited because I drove a Lucas oil car at Barber back in 2016, I want to say, before I drove a USF car. So when I saw Barber on the schedule, I was really excited. I as of right now, I am not running the full season in F4. So that's just a little hint to everyone. But I won't be running the full season, but I hopefully will be able to run a few tracks that I love, one being Coda, and I want to run Barber and VIR again. So that's on my goal list. We'll see if we can make it happen, but hopefully I'll be able to run those races.
All right, that sounds good. Yeah, of course, Formula 4 races at Circuit of the Americas 2 times, once in June and another time during the F1 weekend. So that will be pretty cool. And then, of course, they go back to Sebring. If you were to race the full season, what were your thoughts about them replacing MidOhio for, I believe, Barber?
I was a little sad because I thought running at MidOhio with the Xfinity and the SST trucks was super good for F4, kind of brought attention to us and the media. And so I was all kind of sad that they aren't running there this year. And that track's amazing. It's very technical, I learned, being my first time there. So I kind of struggled there, but it was definitely a shocker to not see MidOhio on the schedule this year.
All right. And so, of course, you kind of mentioned it, but any more details that you could give us about 2020 for your season?
I can say that, let's see, I can almost announce it. I'll say that. It's so close. It's so close. So almost there. I think it will be a little shock to most people, but it's definitely a move in the right direction. So I'm super excited about that. And I guess we'll just have to stay tuned to see when I can announce. It's coming though. I've said that for a while, but I promise it's very soon. I know a lot of people ask me that on social media about 2020, but I'm excited. It should be coming out very soon.
Yeah, as long as Jagger Jones hasn't convinced you to run Arco West, we'll be fine.
Right, I know. I definitely want to drive one of those cars just to see how different it is. Mm-hmm. We'll see. Maybe this year he'll let me drive. I'll replace him. We'll swap. He can race my car and I'll race his for the weekend.
The final race of the year at Phoenix Raceway.
Right?
Oh goodness, that would be insane. Because already,
crazy.
I know you went there last year. We can kind of talk about that. And you saw turn one, or not turn one, but basically the start finish straight, and they just dived down into the dog leg.
Yeah, I was shook. It was crazy. Watching that, I was like, is that okay? Like, are they supposed to do that? And they're like, yeah, they do that here. Mm-hmm. So that was it's definitely a different world. Being around open wheel and going to IndyCar races and then going to NASCAR races is completely different, which is crazy because it's all in the motorsport industry, but they're completely different worlds.
All right, before we end this, any sponsors, shout out, social media shout out, anything you'd like to say?
I would like to say thank you to F4 and SCCA for putting on a great year last year. And I had so much fun along with Alliance and Jay Howard, driver development, and Gas Monkey Energy too. They helped out a lot. And I would love to thank my sponsors for this year, but I'm not allowed to say yet. But it's coming. and maybe we can chat once I know again. But I'm excited, and I love the Oh, also, Saline, thank you for letting me go out to Las Vegas Motor Speedway, their last race of the season, and race with them. That was super cool. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that too. Once those sponsorships and plans come out, boom, we can talk right back
Right
here.
back. Yep.
That will be fun. Well, thank you so much for joining me and letting me interview you. It's been a long time coming, and luckily I was able to do it. So
Yes.
always
Thank you for inviting me.
so much fun, and well, from all of us here at Tip of Texas Sports Network, so long from here. Adios.